Today, spicy Metheglin Mead.
Brian's new favorite.
Okay, so I made this like 2 years ago. I think it was before we were on city steading. Maybe it was more than 2 years ago. I don't even really know.
It was just some experimental, hey, let's put these things together.
What's even funnier about it is it wasn't even supposed to be a metheglin. It was supposed to be something else. And I screwed it up. I don't remember what I did wrong, but I just ended up putting some spices in and said, what the heck, and did it. I think I realized I had messed up once the spices were already in and went, whatever. Well, here we are now. It's amazing, and I'm drinking it. Our VIPs actually saw a sort of similar recipe for this. I've kind of improved it a little bit and tweaked it just slightly, so it's going to be a little bit different. But this is meant to be ready to drink shorter than some of our other meads. I don't want to have to wait 2 years to drink more of this, so I came up with a way to make it go a little bit faster, and, it's got a couple other tweaks, too. But anyway, what is a metheglin? Right? That's probably something you want to know. It really is like a medicine mead, okay? This is like the earliest forms of medicines. They took meads or wine or whatever, and they added spices and herbs and things to it, and it had medicinal value. And it actually really does, because the one I've been drinking helps my stomach, helped with headaches. I was sick for like a week, and it was really helpful. I started drinking that at night instead of whiskey, because, well, whiskey when you're sick, it's not a good time sometimes. So I started drinking some of this and it changed things. I actually felt better. I slept better. I fell asleep easier. So yeah, this was good. Anyway, let's get started. To do this, you're going to need a bunch of stuff. I'm going to list them off as we get there. Some of these are pretty familiar ingredients, and then there's a little bit of a surprise in this one. So to get started, I'm going to use orange blossom honey.
Okay, so we're using Florida Honey Sweet Squeeze Orange Blossom, which we get directly from Amazon. Link in description below. But this is a Florida honey, and it's done by buzzandbee.com, and you can meet the beekeeper, David Rutkin, if you visit their site.
Okay. We're going to use 3.5 pounds of this stuff, and I didn't warm it up or anything, so this might take a couple of minutes to pour out.
Now we're using orange blossom honey because
it's what I used the first time.
It's what I used the first time. But this whole thing, and when it comes together, it reminds me of the old time Christmas oranges. I don't know if you guys are familiar with this, where they would take an orange and they would decorate it by cramming spices into it like clove. And so the combination of the spices with that little hint of orange, it's just really delightful. Yeah. And that's why we're also going to add something else that Brian's going to get to in a moment.
First thing I want to add is tea. Now, a lot of people get confused on why we add tea to mead. It's not really for flavor at all. It does maybe a touch of nutrition for the yeast, but really it's for tannins, because ultimately there's not a lot that's going to be in this that's going to add tannins. That gives you that mouthfeel. It balances out sweet, tart, acidic, all those things. It helps to bring it together, so to speak.
If you watched our video, Tannins and Acids, link in the description, we talk about the marriage of the 3 different profiles. There is the base, if you will, which is the primary ingredients of your beverage. And then there's the tannins and acids and the balance that they play with each other to round out those base notes and give some little punctual accents that make it taste even better.
She makes it sound so nice. Now I'm going to add a little bit of water to this because I want to get this to about that level so I can mix it up. If I add all the water now, there's no way I can stir this. So by putting it only halfway, I can slosh it around and splash it around, get some oxygen in there because you need that in the beginning anyway. But in order to do this, I'm going to need something. My spoon of unusual size. All right, and there we have it. So I'm just going to put this in and I'm just stirring it up. No big secret here, no big mystery. I'm stirring honey into water and tea.
And that's why I'm holding the base, because there's a lot of honey in there.
And I'll spill it. It could happen. Yeah, she was talking about the spices in this being like a Christmassy thing. And I can totally see that. It's almost an autumn type of spice flavor. And, it's the middle of August now. This will be ready probably around Christmas time, I'm hoping for. I said I want this to be ready sooner than the last time. Now, That's a wide range of variables, because the last time it took 2 years before this was something I really wanted to drink. I'd hope to cut that down. Now, could I cut it down to a year? Hopefully. Could I cut it down to less than a year? I don't really know, but I have taken a couple steps to help with that. More on that in a little bit. Okay, I would normally put the spoon back into the tub, but I know I'm going to need it in another couple minutes, so I'm just going to leave it out. So at this point, I'm going to add in some of the other ingredients that we're going to be using, and that is some raisins. Now, raisins are going in here, but not for the reason that you might think. They're not really a lot of nutrition for yeast. They do have some, but not a lot. You need a lot of raisins, like in our raisin wine video. That was mostly a spoof. People took it seriously. But anyway, I'm using about 30 raisins, just chopped up so that they don't swell up into grapes again, and they're just going to go in. What do they add? They add a little bit of tannin, they add a little bit of extra sweetness, and they add a little flavor. Okay?
They have this interesting depth that they add to brews that is kind of hard to explain, but you miss it when it's not there.
Right, and in a brew like this, the raisin with the orange blossom honey and then the cinnamon stick that I'm putting in, the cloves. I'm using 2 whole cloves because clove can overpower.
Yeah, saying 2 cloves, we were like, oh, they're so tiny. No, cloves are big
and in
flavor.
the one that I've been drinking, I just finished a bottle of it last night. You can taste the clove, but it doesn't overpower. It had a lovely balance, and that's why I don't want to mess with that. Another thing that I'm going to be adding is allspice berries. Now these, they just smell of like Christmas, okay?
Whenever I smell a Christmas-themed potpourri, that's what it smells like.
Yeah, they're in that sort of thing. I said 6 berries on here. Some of these are smaller, so I probably have like 8 here. But still, not a lot. I mean, like, you know, a teaspoon of these things. Not a crazy amount. On top of that now, I'm going to add in something that we made that we use in quite a few of our brews. It seems to work really well. It is actually dried orange zest.
And this is what I alluded to earlier when I was talking about something to pair with the orange blossom honey that we're using. This is going to bump up that orange essence just a little bit more.
And you'd be amazed, just that little pinch, it's about maybe a teaspoon of that orange zest, will actually come through. You will totally taste this. Again, this adds a little bit of tannin, it adds a tiny amount of nutrient, but it adds flavor. That's why we're using it.
It also adds a minuscule amount of acid, but not too much. And I did talk about this, again, referencing to that tannin and acid video, that citric acid, which is in citrus, can be problematic adding in primary, because what yeast will do to it, it'll turn it into the
acetic acid.
Acetic acid. And the way I remember acetic acid is from Acetobacter, which makes vinegar. So the acetic acid has that vinegary taste.
Right.
And we really don't want that included in this brew. But because we didn't have any of the pith with our rind, Brian was very careful when he peeled it and then we dehydrated it, the amount of citric acid in this is so minuscule that we're not worried about that.
It's more the essential oils that we were after.
And so our pyramid of flavor with the base, the acid, and the tannin, we're going more tannic than we are acid, and that should give us a great flavor profile.
Now, you probably noticed that I used a little bit more honey than usual. And also, you probably know that cloves, allspice berries, and cinnamon are all antibacterial, they kill things that you put them in. The yeast are a fungus, and that is one of the things that antibacterial and anti-living organism things don't like. They will actually try to kill the yeast. So the yeast are going to struggle just a little bit more. So I made it harder on them, but I wanted this done faster.
We upped the honey. We put in antibacterials. What the heck are we doing to our poor yeast colony?
Oh, before I get to that, I need more water. I don't mean to hold it right in front of your face.
It's okay.
And then I'm mixing it up. And now is when the 2 major changes that we do are coming into play. And the first one is, you might notice, I have in my hand a whole packet
of Alvin 71 Beast.
Yes, we do own them.
Yes. Somebody said that fairies come into our house and place half packets around as a tribute. I thought that was awesome.
That'd be pretty cool.
But because I know that the the antibacterial properties and the extra honey is going to make it a little harder. I'm using a whole packet today. I'm breaking my own rule. And this is to prove that there are times that rules are made to be broken, okay? As much as we like to think of that way, think of it kind of like, you know, the Pirates Code. It's more of a guideline. So the reason is because having more in there means they have a better chance of starting up, okay? So that before they get killed off by that antibiotic property, it'll actually start up the fermentation first.
In other words, we have a larger colony right from the beginning.
Right. Giving it a good shot. I'm going to mix that in before I put in the last and secret ingredient. Now, this has been something hotly debated that we are against using. I want to point something out. We are not against using organic nutrients. We use them all the time, as a matter of fact. Usually it's in the form of fruits or leaves or twigs or, you know, cinnamon sticks and seeds. But we're not really against the stuff you can buy. I just don't normally use it. But today, adding yeast hulls. I've wanted to experiment with these for a while. We bought it a while back, and I just haven't found the brew that was right, and I wanted to present it in a way that made sense, because you guys are used to us being against this stuff and not using it. I'm against using the chemical ones, like the ones that include diammonium phosphate and things like that. But the organic one, like even Fermate O, I'm not against the use of that. It's basically the same as this. It's essentially yeast hulls.
So what are yeast hulls?
Good question, Derica. Yeast hulls are just dead yeast cells, okay? I said this in another one of our videos, that in every packet of yeast that you get that's dry yeast, not wet yeast, not the liquid yeast, dry yeast, a certain amount of that yeast is already dead. They are nutrient for the other yeast. Yeast are cannibals. It's just the way they are. This is literally just dried up dead yeast, okay?
Yeast hulls is Soylent Green!
Oh, God. You can make yeast hulls yourself if you have an abundance of baker's yeast, which right now I don't know who has an abundance of baker's yeast. Taking a half a teaspoon of it or so, putting it in a little bit of water and boiling it. You kill off the yeast, there you go. Yeast nutrient. It does a body good. But for this, I'm doing a gallon, so I'm just going to use a half teaspoon of this stuff. A little goes a long way. That's it. But again, I did that because this yeast has 2 strikes against it going into the must. I didn't want to make it that much harder on it. And like I said, I wanted to introduce the idea of using an organic style yeast nutrient. This stuff is cheap too. I mean, I think it was like $10 for a pound of it. It's going to last me like 20 years.
Now, if this was a mellow where we had a bunch of fruit solids in there, then we wouldn't see any need to add additional nutrients, because we know there's plenty of nitrogen in the fruit solids, and that's going to act as a nutrient for the yeast. Because we don't have anything like that in here, we did want to give the yeast a little something to munch on.
I'll be back in about 20 minutes when I break up all these balls of yeast hulls. All right, that's as mixed as I'm going to get it. Some of them are just going to have to dissolve on their own. It's like a mustache. Save some for later. So the one thing we haven't done yet is taken a reading. Somebody's going to say, well, why didn't you do that before you had a... Because it doesn't really matter, okay? I'm going to dump it right back in, because all of this stuff has been sanitized in.
Red bucket of sanitization!
So glad we brought that back. Just saying. And taking a reading is easy. We're using a hydrometer, graduated cylinder, and the poor man's wine thief, also known as a turkey baster. And I'm just going to fill it up, take a reading, find out where it starts at. I'm guessing somewhere between 1.125 and 1.130, mostly because it should be 1.125 if it was really a gallon, but this is our wide-mouthed gallon that we know is a little bit less than a gallon, and I didn't fill it all the way.
A gallon.
I like that. So I'm guessing more like 1.130-ish. This is going to be fun. 1.150. We have only gone that high on two other occasions, and it didn't end well. This is going to be interesting.
Do we want to push it and put a little bit more water in there?
I think we're going to put a little bit more water in here. I don't know how much lower I can really get it, but I can try. Just how greedy do I want to be?
Yeah.
Right about there. I would also like to point something out. I already see bubbles forming in this. I have never seen that happen before, but...
Yeah, totally.
They really are.
So this may be a good illustration for Brian and us and I and you to learn why they suggest taking the reading before you add the yeast. Because we're dry pitching now, probably taking the reading before we add the yeast is a better idea. Before, when we were wet pitching, in other words, hydrating the yeast prior, we were going to change the readings, so that's why we added it in and then took the reading. But now that we've changed that system, I think we may want to reassociate or rethink that.
Okay, adding more water was a good idea. It's now 1.138, which is still a little higher than I really wanted, but I think we can manage that. Essentially, this is intended to stop at like the 15% mark, like 71B tends to do. Even though it's a 14% yeast, it tends to stop at 15, sometimes higher. So this will be on the sweet side, but with all those spices in there, it balanced out beautifully. Let me write that number down. So we're just going to stick a lid on it, put an airlock on it, and this is going to sit somewhere relatively warm, 70 to 75 degrees Fahrenheit, and it's going to sit for probably 2 weeks before I even look at it because it's a relatively high gravity. I don't want to mess with it. What I am going to do, though, is give it a swirl every day when I think of it. And a swirl is just this. Spin it up until everything starts to move. You want all those leaves coming up. Everything gets in. This will start bubbling like crazy, most likely, because, you know, it's degassing at the same time. So I like to do that for about the first week or two. After that, I stop doing that anymore. But I don't remove the lid at all during that time, okay? There's no fruit cap in here. There's nothing to worry about. Those raisins aren't going to be a problem. But you should see the airlock start having activity within 12 to 72 hours. Give it up to like 3 days. If you do this and you don't see activity in 3 days, contact us through the channel and I'll help you out. More than likely, it's a little stuck or your yeast was dead or something like that. But let me know and we'll see if we can help you out. So we finished filming like an hour ago. So we're still on the same day that we made this. And Derek noticed something unusual, an unprecedented event. We are 1 hour in, and as you can see, that airlock is bubbling. And I thought, no way, it's just got to be temperature differential or something. There's a kreuzen. That is proof that it's actually starting up already. So, maybe there's something to this whole yeast holes thing. Okay, I've been wrong before. You know, it's happened once or twice. And I'm okay with that. I'm perfectly fine with admitting when I've made a mistake. If this really does work that well, we will start using yeast hulls much more often because this is insane. I've never seen anything like it.
But to be honest, we did a lot of different things with this particular brew. So I think before we have a definitive, yes, this is the thing, we'll have to do some experimentation and tests.
Yeah, exactly. This is not definitive. This is just maybe it's helping. But anyway, this is going to go sit for like 2 weeks, like we said.
Thanks for liking and subscribing.
And as always, thanks for watching. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.